There are apps on Android phones right now that are reading your messages, recording your keystrokes, capturing your banking screens, and sending that information somewhere without your knowledge. They do not appear in your recent apps list. They do not show up in obvious ways in your settings. They are designed specifically to be invisible to casual inspection, and they have been operating on the Android platform for years with the tools to do so hiding in plain sight within Android's own permission system. Android 17 changes that. But before we get into what Android 17 does and how to use its new tools, there's a misconception circulating that needs to be corrected immediately because it is causing real confusion. Android 17 is not a tracker. Android 17 is not spying on you. Android 17 is the most powerful set of privacy and security tools Google has ever built into the Android operating system, specifically designed to expose the malicious apps that have been exploiting the system for years and to shut down the pathways they use to operate. The confusion matters. Because if you misunderstand what Android 17 is doing, you might disable the very features that are protecting you. So let us start from the beginning with exactly how these tracking apps work, why they have been so difficult to detect, and what Android 17's new tools do about each of the mechanisms they exploit. How hidden screen tracking apps actually work. To understand why these apps have been so effective and so invisible, you need to understand 3 legitimate Android permissions that malicious apps have been abusing. The first is accessibility services. Accessibility services were created with a genuine and important purpose. They allow apps to interact with the screen on behalf of users who have visual, motor, or other disabilities. A screen reader uses accessibility services to read out the content of other apps. A switch control app uses accessibility services to allow navigation without touch input. The same technical capability that allows a legitimate accessibility app to read screen content to a visually impaired user also allows a malicious app to read every message you type, every notification that appears, and every screen that displays on your phone. Accessibility service access, once granted, gives an app a window into essentially everything visible on your device. Malicious apps request accessibility service permissions by describing themselves as useful utilities, a battery optimizer, a device cleaner, a performance booster. You grant the permission because the app's stated function sounds reasonable, and accessibility is one of many permissions that most users do not think about carefully. Once granted, the app is reading your messages, your banking screens, and your keystrokes in real time. The second abused permission category is drawing over other apps, also called display over other apps or overlay permission. This permission allows an app to place a transparent or partially transparent layer over other apps' screens. The legitimate use case is apps like chat heads, screen dimming tools, or certain accessibility overlays that need to appear above other content. The malicious use case is an invisible overlay placed over your banking app's login screen that captures what you type while showing you the legitimate banking interface underneath. You see the real banking app? You type your real credentials. The overlay captures them and sends them elsewhere. You never know anything happened. The third mechanism is screen capture permission, which in older Android versions could be obtained and maintained in background conditions that made ongoing screen capture possible without the user receiving any visible indication that recording was occurring. These 3 permission categories, accessibility services, overlay drawing, and screen capture, are the technical toolkit that hidden tracking apps have been exploiting. The permissions exist for legitimate reasons. The malicious apps wear the costume of legitimate apps to obtain them. What Android 17 does about each of these? Android 17 introduces what Google calls dynamic signal monitoring. Rather than simply checking whether an app has a permission at the moment you review your settings, dynamic signal monitoring watches how apps actually behave with their permissions over time and flags patterns that indicate abuse rather than legitimate use. A legitimate accessibility app that reads screen content uses that capability in consistent, predictable patterns tied to user interaction. A malicious tracking app uses accessibility services continuously, capturing content regardless of whether the user is actively engaging with the screen in ways that would require accessibility support. Dynamic signal monitoring identifies the difference between these usage patterns and generates alerts when an app's behavior with a sensitive permission departs from what legitimate use of that permission looks like. This is a fundamentally different approach from static permission auditing. Static auditing tells you which apps have which permissions. Dynamic monitoring tells you which apps are using those permissions in ways that suggest malicious intent, even if the app obtained the permission legitimately. Android 17 also introduces specific alerts for apps that attempt to hide their icons after installation. This behavior, hiding an app's icon from the launcher after it has been installed, is a significant red flag. Legitimate apps want to be visible and accessible. An app that installs and then hides itself from your app drawer is an app that does not want to be found. Android 17 intercepts this behavior and notifies you when it occurs, giving you the opportunity to investigate the app before it has fully concealed itself. The location system in Android 17 has also received meaningful improvements relevant to privacy. New location usage indicators make it clearer when an app is accessing your location, with improved visual signals that appear even when you're using other apps. A new temporary location permission button allows you to grant location access for a single session without creating a persistent permission that the app can exercise indefinitely. If you need to let an app use your location once, you grant it once, and the permission expires rather than remaining available to the app in perpetuity. Your security sweep. What to do right now. The new Android 17 tools are valuable, but they work best in combination with a manual security audit that removes existing threats before the monitoring begins. Here is the complete sweep process. Step 1. Audit. Your accessibility services open settings, tap accessibility. Look for installed apps, downloaded apps, or a section showing which apps have accessibility service access. On some Android versions, this appears under Special App Access. Review every app listed there. For each app, ask a simple question. Does this app have a legitimate reason to read my screen? Screen readers for visual impairment have legitimate reasons. Voice control apps have legitimate reasons. A battery optimizer app, a cleaning tool, a flashlight app, a photo editor, any app whose stated function does not require reading, your screen content has no legitimate reason to have accessibility service access. For any app you do not recognize or that has accessibility access without an obvious legitimate need, tap it and revoke the permission. Turn off whatever toggle controls its accessibility access. If you are uncertain whether an app is legitimate, search its exact name online before deciding. Legitimate apps are easy to find information about. Apps with no discernible origin or with suspicious descriptions should be removed. Step 2. Review overlay and screen capture permissions. Go to Settings, then Apps or Application Manager. In the top right corner or through a menu option, look for Special App Access or More options. Find Display over other apps or Draw over other apps. This list shows every app that has permission to place content over other apps' screens. Apply the same test. Does this app have a legitimate reason to display content over other apps? Navigation apps, certain assistive tools, and some chat applications have legitimate reasons. Most other apps do not. Revoke overlay permission from any app that does not have an obvious specific need for it. Step 3. Hunt for hidden apps. Standard app drawers show you the apps that have visible launcher icons. Hidden tracking apps often do not have launcher icons. Finding them requires looking at the complete installed apps list rather than what appears in your drawer. Go to Settings, then Apps or Application Manager. On many Android devices, there's a toggle or filter option that shows all apps including system apps. Enable this view. You are now looking at everything installed on your device. Scroll through this list looking for apps you do not recognize. Pay particular attention to apps with names that sound like system components. System Service, Android Helper, Phone Manager, Device Monitor. These generic, system-sounding names are a common disguise used by malicious apps to avoid detection during casual review. A legitimate Android system component does not typically appear in your installed apps list looking like a third-party app. Legitimate system components are usually clearly identified as Android system elements or as services from your device manufacturer. For any app you do not recognize and did not intentionally install, tap it. Look at its permissions, its storage use, its network activity. If you cannot identify what it is and why it is on your device, uninstall it. Some malicious apps protect themselves from easy uninstallation by requesting device administrator status. If you try to uninstall an app and find that the uninstall option is grayed out or unavailable, the app may have device administrator privileges. To check and remove device administrator status, go to Settings, Security or Biometrics and Security, then Device Admin Apps. Any app listed there that you did not intentionally grant administrator status to is a significant red flag. Remove its administrator status by tapping it and selecting Deactivate. Once deactivated, you should be able to uninstall it through the normal apps list. Step 4. Run a Play Protect Scan. Open the Google Play Store. Tap your profile picture in the top right corner. Tap Play Protect. Tap the Scan button. Play Protect will scan all installed apps against Google's database of known malicious applications. This scan catches apps that have been identified and flagged by Google's security team. It does not catch every possible threat, particularly newly created malicious apps that have not yet been identified and cataloged. But it catches known threats effectively and is worth running as part of your sweep. If Play Protect identifies any apps as potentially harmful, follow its guidance to remove them. Step 5. Review app. Permissions holistically. With the specific high-risk permissions reviewed, do a broader permission audit. Go to Settings, Privacy, Permission Manager. This view shows you permissions organized by category. Under each category, you can see which apps have access to that capability. Work through the categories that matter most for privacy: camera, microphone, location, contacts, phone, SMS, and storage. For each app listed under each category, ask whether that app's function requires that permission. A camera app needs camera permission. A calling app needs phone permission. A flashlight app does not need microphone access. A calculator does not need location access. A simple game does not need contacts access. Revoke any permission that does not connect logically to the app's stated function. Legitimate apps can request permissions again if they genuinely need them. Malicious apps that lose critical permissions typically stop functioning as intended, which is exactly the outcome you want. Preventative habits that change your risk profile. Removing existing threats is the immediate priority. Preventing new ones requires changing some habits that create vulnerability in the first place. Install apps only from the Google Play Store. This single habit change eliminates the majority of malicious app installation risk. Apps in the web Play Store have gone through a review process and are subject to ongoing monitoring by Google's security team. Apps installed from outside the Play Store, from third-party app stores, from websites, or from files sent through messaging apps have none of those protections and are the primary vector through which sophisticated tracking apps reach user devices. On Android, installing from outside the Play Store requires enabling the Install Unknown Apps permission, usually on a per-source basis. Unless you have a specific, understood reason to install from an alternative source, this permission should remain off for all sources. Pay attention to permission requests at installation. When you install an app and it immediately requests accessibility service access, device administrator status, or overlay permissions, that is an aggressive permission request that is unusual for most legitimate applications. A legitimate app that genuinely needs an elevated permission will typically explain why it needs it in context. An app that requests high-level permissions immediately and without clear explanation is behaving in a way consistent with malicious intent. You do not have to accept every permission request to proceed with installation. Deny permissions that do not make sense for the app's function. If the app requires a specific permission to work as advertised, you will know because specific functionality will not work until you grant it. That provides more information about whether the permission is genuinely necessary before you commit to granting it. Android 17's dynamic signal monitoring, icon hiding alerts, and improved location controls represent a genuine advancement in the operating system's ability to surface and shut down hidden tracking apps. But they are most effective as a layer on top of the kind of active, informed security management this sweep represents. The apps that have been exploiting accessibility services, overlays, and screen capture permissions to track users did so because most users did not know to look for them, did not know how to find them when looking, and did not have tools that caught their behavioral patterns in real time. Android 17 addresses the third problem. This sweep addresses the first two. Your device is yours. What runs on it should be under your deliberate control. The combination of Android 17's new capabilities and the audit process we have just covered gets you there. The hidden is now visible. Act on what you see.